Jaya Radha Madhava Jaya Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Jana Vallabha Jaya Giri Varadhari Jaya Yashoda Nandana Jaya Vraja Jana Ranjana Jaya Jamuna Tiravana Chari Jaya Giri Varadari Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Jai Go Premanande Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Sarasatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Today we'll be reading from the first canto, second chapter, text number 11. If it sounds familiar, it's because it's the verse we spoke on yesterday. Vadanti tattva-vidas. I don't think I brought my phone. If I could, not that, because then you won't be able to find the other reference. Vadanti tattva-vidas tattvaṁ jñānam advayam brahmeti paramātmeti Bhagavān iti śabdyate. So the vadanti means they say, and we use that form of speech in English a lot. They say that people who set goals, they're more likely to succeed or something like that. And who's they? It's a collective group of voices who somehow or other figured it out. Vadanti, they say. And tat, which is an important word. It's a demonstrative pronoun. It's pointing to something specific. And tattva-vida, and again we have the word tat, but it's got va, so it's an adverb. Like in English, if you have nice, and then you put nicely, it becomes an adverb. It's descriptive, but it's descriptive of a state of being that's ongoing, like nicely, like Kurnath does things nicely, which is true. And then yat, which, jñānam, knowledge, cognate with the English word know, and that's why third graders who learn the word know scratch their heads and say, what the heck? Because it's spelled K-N-O-W, a adaptation of this ñā sound in Sanskrit. Advayam. So advayam means nondual, which is an important aspect of understanding our philosophy of achintya bed abed tattva. And the dvayam, or two, dvitiya, bhayam dvitiya abhinibheshata syad. There's a way in which the Bhagavatam describes how those who forget that everything is God and everything comes from God and we're intimately related with Him, which is indicated in a verse spoken by one of the Yogendras where he says, Bhayam, fear, dvitiya, abhinibheshata syad. Syad means something arises. So bhayam syat means fear comes when we become abhinibheshata, absorbed in something other than God. A second thing. There is no second thing. That's one of the points of this verse. There's just one thing. But that's called advayam. Not two things. And then there's dvitiya, which is the illusion that there's something other than God and becoming absorbed in it, which causes all problems. Brahmeti, and that non-dual one thing is known as Brahman. Bhagavān iti, known as, and it's known as Brahman. Paramātmā, as Prabhupada had translates in various purports, for instance, in 2:25, or 2:35, the verse that ends on Anumapakai, he calls super spirit. So Paramātmā, the super spirit, is known as Paramātmā. So that's one of the varieties within the oneness of God's manifestation, the super spirit who's all-pervasive. Ekopya sora charitam jagaranda kotim yach chaktirasti jagaranda chaya yaranta andantarasta paramanu chayantarastam govindamadi purusham tamaham bhajami. He, the supreme spirit, the super spirit, is there within every atom and within the hearts of all beings. an expansion of Kshirodakshay Vishnu. And then you have Bhagavān. Iti. Iti is quotation marks. It is said that these are the three different varieties of the absolute truth, known as Bhagavān. Bhag means a share of something, and Bhagavān means one who has, in this context, the everything. And Ishavasyam idam sarvam is one of the descriptions in the Sri Upanishad of Bhagavan. Ishavasyam idam sarvam yat kincha jagatyam jagat. That he's the controller and owner of everything. Śabdyate, it's so sounded. And so the translation goes like this: learned transcendentalists who know the absolute truth call this non-dual substance Brahman, Paramātmā, or Bhagavān. And let's have two more chanters who didn't say the verse yesterday. Just say and then we'll repeat. Vadanti tattva-vidas tattvaṁ jñānam advayam brahmeti paramātmeti Bhagavān iti śabdyate vadanti tattva-vidas advayam brahmeti paramātmeti Bhagavān iti śabdyate. And here's your purport. The absolute truth is both subject and object, and there is no qualitative difference there. Therefore, Brahman, Paramā, and Bhagavān are qualitatively one and the same. The same substance is realized as impersonal Brahman by the students of the Upanishads, as localized Paramātmā by the Hiranyagarbhas or the yogis, and as Bhagavān by the devotees. In other words, Bhagavān, or the personality of Godhead, is the last word of the absolute truth. Paramātmā is the partial representation of the personality of Godhead, and impersonal Brahman is the glowing effulgence of the personality of Godhead, as the sun rays are to the sun god. Less intelligent students of either of the above schools sometimes argue in favor of their own respective realization, but those who are perfect seers of the absolute truth know well that the above three features of the one absolute truth are different perspective views, seen from different angles of vision. As it is explained in the first shloka of the first chapter of the Bhagavatam, the supreme truth is self-sufficient, cognizant, and free from the illusion of relativity. In the relative world, the knower is different from the known, but in the absolute truth, both the knower and the known are one and the same thing. In the relative world, the knower is the living spirit or superior energy, whereas the known is inert matter or inferior energy. Therefore, there is a duality of inferior and superior energy, whereas in the absolute realm, both the knower and the known are of the same superior energy. There are three kinds of energies of the supreme energetic. There is no difference between the energy and the energetic, but there is a difference of quality of energies. The absolute realm and the living entities are of the same superior energy, but the material world is inferior energy. The absolute being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned. The living being in contact with the inferior energy is illusioned, thinking he belongs to the inferior energy. Therefore, there is the sense of relativity in the material world. In the absolute, there is no such sense of difference between the knower and the known, and therefore everything there is absolute. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Rama. So in the verse previous to this, Sutta Goswami had said, Kama sinendriya pritir labo jivete yavata jivasya tattva jignasya narto yascheha karmabhi, which means that you could live in the world in a healthy way and maintain yourself, but you should do so with the intention of being fit to inquire about the absolute truth. And that's the prime purpose of life. Jivasya tattva jignasa, inquire about tattva. And so that concept of tattva comes into play there in that verse that comes before, vadanti tattva-vidas. So there is a way in which, in context, Sutta Goswami is now giving a more philosophical understanding of tat, or tattva. And when we say tat, we're pointing to something substantial. And when we say tattva, we're pointing out a category, something that is distinguished from, well, that's what category means. There's a definition to the quality of a particular energy, in this case, and Prabhupada mentioned it a couple of times in the purport. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Bhumir apo analo vayu kamano bhurirevacha ahankara ityame vinna prakritirashtada aparayamitastvanyam prakritim vidimi param jivabhutam mahabahoya yedam darite jagat. That there's inferior energy, which is characterized as earth, water, fire, air, ether, mind, intelligence, and false ego. Then he says, besides these binda, separated energies, there's a superior energy, which are the parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, which he mentions elsewhere. Mabhaivamsho jiva loke jiva bhuta sanatana manakshastan indriyani prakriti-stani karshati. There Krishna says these particles, maybe that's too technical of a word, but they're living entities who are part of him. And they're relative to the whole. Krishna is the whole and they're parts of the whole. And they're struggling with their misidentification with the lower energy. That's their problem. As I quoted earlier, bhayam dvitiya abhinibheshata syat. Abhinibheshata means to be absorbed in something, and the living being can be absorbed in the inferior energy, and therefore suffers and is afraid. And vadanti, they say, do the learned sages, as Krishna mentions in the Bhagavad Gita in several places, where he's giving a similar kind of overview of categories of energy so that we can focus our attention on what's most important. Don't major in minor things. And for instance, in the second chapter of the Gita, Krishna says, Nasato vidite bhavo, nabhavo vidite sata, ubarior apidrishton tas tvanios tattva-darshibi. He refers us to those who are vadanti. Here's they say. Here's the they, the tattva-darshis. What are they? They're people who know the difference between various energies. And what are the qualities of those energies? When Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was teaching Sanatana Goswami, he quoted from the Vishnu Purana to give a similar foundation for his philosophy of Achintya Abhed Tattva. And in the Vishnu Purana, there are three categories of energy mentioned. Vishnu Shakti Paraprokta Kshetra Gyakya Tatapara Avidyakarma Sangyanya Tritiya Shaktir Ishate. Tritiya means three, obviously. Shaktir, these are three Shaktis. And these are the three big categories. So what are they? There's the superior energy, which is consciousness. And then there's the inferior energy, which is inert matter, which is dull. It doesn't have cognition. And then there's an energy called Maya, which is, there's the marginal energy. So there's the internal potency, then there's the external potency, dull matter, and then there's the living being who's called tatastha. He's marginal, so he can be identified with either the inferior or the superior energy. And when the soul interacts with the lower energy, then there's the obvious result, which is the illusionment of the soul, which is exhibited by the soul's engagement in fruitive activities which bind him to the material world. And nasato vidite bhavo, nabhavo vidite sata. So the material world is called, this category of energy is called bhava. And bhava means that energy that is not stable. It's always changing. It becomes something else constantly. And in the 11th canto of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam, in the Krishna's teachings to Uddhava, he gives this analogy, which is also I've heard given by Buddhists, which is that you can't step in the same river twice. If you step in the Mississippi River and then come back 30 seconds later and step in it, you may say, I stepped in the Mississippi twice, but you didn't step in the same river because it's constantly in flux. And then the analogy goes on to compare the body to a river. Body is made of inferior energy. And you may say then you can't breathe into the same body twice. As if you exhale now and then inhale, you inhaled into a different body because it's changed since the time you exhaled. And this is an observation of the quality of these tattvas, or these categories of energy that Krishna says have been distinguished for us by those who have seen the difference between them. And there are consequences, because when we identify with the lower energy as marginal beings, we're conscious just like Krishna, but we have the choice, or we can be subjected to either the inferior or the superior energy. And the result is quite different. So that's where the human intelligence comes into play. Humans can contemplate causality. And therefore the Sri Upanishad says, Anyarevahur sambhavad, anyarahura sambhavat, iti shushrumadhiranam yenas tadvid shakshire. That smart people have figured out that there's a gulf of difference between giving one's attention to the inferior energy and giving one's attention to the superior energy. That helps, doesn't it? Because we always have to choose where to put our attention. And the word tat here, vadanti, tattva-vidas. So, as I mentioned before, it's a demonstrative pronoun, which means it's the same word in English, tut and that. You just add an H, and then you point to something, you say, Which one? That one. There is a school of thought in which the persons who are not so thoughtful, but we call it a school of thought, school of thoughtlessness, say that there's nothing ultimately to point to. You can't point to something because there's nothing there. Materialistic people say that ultimately there's no there. Everything's manifest and non-manifest. And impersonalists, those who are so-called followers of God, but then they say there is no form to God, they're also in the similar category. They can't point to anything because there's no there. There's no tut to point to. But Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who espouses the philosophy of Bhagavatam, says, no, there is something very specific to point to. And this is so helpful for us because everyone's searching for the ultimate object of meditation in this world. And we may unconsciously be doing that because it's our nature to want to repose our attention somewhere where we'll enjoy. And when we repose our attention on those forms that are changing, we become disappointed. Proof of that is on YouTube nowadays. Whoever that is, have a series of images of famous, formerly very beautiful people who, through time lapse now, either through artificial intelligence or actually just showing what they look like in 2025 compared to the way they looked in 2000. People leave comments saying, "Ew." And what to speak of when they leave the present body that everyone's been meditating on. Prabhupada makes this point. He said, people want to be close to a famous or a beautiful person, but if the soul leaves the body, and then you offer the opportunity, they just died, and they say, okay, now would you like to go and spend the night and be with that person? Then the answer is no. There's a story in the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam about a great king who had won many battles, and he entered the battlefield for his last time. His limbs were smashed, but when he fell to the ground, he had bitten his lip to show his valor, even in dying. And afterwards, his wives, his queens, he had many, had come, and they were clutching his body and his clothes and had surrounded him at a time in the afternoon when there was a deadline for him to be cremated, and they were wailing. And Yamaraj, hearing the wailing sound, had visited them on the battlefield in the form of a 5-year-old child. And he asked them, why are you crying? And they said, our husband, the king, is gone. And he said, I don't know what you're talking about because you're holding on to him right there. And he has the same ears and the same eyes and the same nose as he ever did. So what are you talking about? They say, you don't understand, little boy. And he said, no, you don't understand. And he went on to say, you never saw the king. The king is beyond the body, and now he's gone, but you never saw him. And this is the mistake of most people. They don't distinguish between the different categories of energy. And when one becomes clear because of receiving knowledge, tattva-vidas, one becomes a seer of the categories of energy. And Krishna says this means that you're learned. For instance, in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that he gives the definition of a learned person. Kshetra jñānam shapimam vidhi sarva kshetrishu bharata kshetrajñāyo jñānam yatash jñānam matambama. Krishna says, here's my opinion. This is the definition of a person who's learned. They know that the body is a kshetra, it's just a place, a field, literally, and that the person who's a different category of energy is the kshetrajñā. And that means the knower of the field. And there's a big difference between saying that I am the field and that I'm the knower of the field. And that Shukadeva Goswami points out in the 10th canto, 14th chapter near the end, that when one comes to this distinction, a clearer distinction that I have a body, I'm not the body, then this is the category of learned persons. And Krishna also says, in Gita Vidya Vinaya Sampane Brahmani Gavihastini Shuni Chaiva Shupakecha Pandita Sambadarshina. A pandit, a learned person, is someone who's able to see the two categories of energy in every living being. There's the external form as an elephant or a Brahman or somebody who's homeless or any number of other forms of life, and then the soul that animates the body. This most people don't know. What to speak of knowing tat, as referenced by Sutta Goswami in this verse, of the origin of everything. Who is that person you can point to? Om tad Vishnu paramam param sada vashanti suryot dipachakshat tam tad vipraso vipanyavo jagrim sahasmindate Vishnuriyat paramam padam. There is a paramam padam, there's a superior place to go, and it's not Hawaii. I found that out by going there many times and suffered greatly in Hawaii, partly because of thinking that I would enjoy. But I remember also going to Japan for the first time and thinking, no, okay, Hawaii is one thing, Japan's that's different, because it's so far away and different and mystical. And as I was descending in the flight and waking up from sleeping, I looked out the window and I saw an overpass, and there were two ambulances going across with their lights going. And then I remembered what Krishna said in the Bhagavad Gita, Janma Mrityu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanuvar Darshana. There's a way in which the material world is anywhere you go. Brahma Bhuvana Loka Punar Avaitano Arjuna Mabupetet Tukonteya Punar Janmana Vidyate. Every inch of the material world is categorized in the same way. So it's Mrityu Loka, which is one of the first things I read in a Back to Godhead magazine, the first Back to Godhead magazine I got. And it enlightened me. And I realized that, as I wrote in my notebook, not back when I got my first Back to Godhead magazine, but this relates. It's not that there are many problems in the world. The world itself is a problem. And that's the idea of when you're able to categorize properly, vadanti tattva-vidas. What are we pointing to? What are we talking about? What are the qualities of the energy? That's when you can solve the problem. You have to do it categorically. You can't do it piecemeal by trying to adjust in the material world. That's one of the main points. And then the positive point comes that then what do you want to point to? And this is where most philosophers fall short, is they don't give us an option. They may say that the world is full of suffering, and then they have an incomplete knowledge of where we can repose our attention and where we can give our energy, where we can serve. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu then informs Sanatana Goswami that you're an eternal servant of Krishna. That's your nature. And Krishna is the source of everything. Aham sarvasya prabhavo, matak sarvam pravartate, iti matva, vajante mam buddha bhava samanvita. Krishna says, when you can come to this conclusion, then you'll give me all your attention. There's nowhere else to give your attention logically. And so this verse is vitally important. Vadanti tattva-vidas, tattvaṁ jñānam advayam, brahmeti, paramātmeti, Bhagavān iti śabdyate. What's more, Krishna goes into the different aspects of his own nature. In the Bhagavad Gita, for instance, he mentions Brahmano hi pratishtaham amritasya vyasya cha shashvatasya chatarmasya sukhasya ikantikasya cha. Some may say, well, Brahman is the supreme, the effulgence of the Lord. But Krishna himself says, no, I'm the source of that. You come back to the source and you find the origin of everything. That's where you can repose your attention. And just a quick thought about the importance of words. They're an abstraction of speech, and they lead us to various philosophical points. They matter. Words matter, and the order of words, syntax, obviously, makes a huge difference. Where you even place commas can change the entire meaning of a word. Like, there's some book, Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. It's about a panda. Walks in and, I mean, if you change the syntax or the punctuation around, it sounds like the panda came in and he shot somebody and left. Or if he eats shoots and he eats leaves, there's a difference. And I was fascinated by a purport that we read recently from the Prayers Personified Vedas. And that's not it. And this is in need of a password. Which you can just tell me. Nirkula said use the mic. Just for your consideration, the idea of language and how precise the language of the Bhagavatam is, and how important it is to use language to point to God. Om Tat Sat. This is something Krishna talks about in the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, that where are we pointing our attention? Tat. That. Something you can point to, and the category has to be perfect. It has to be the perfect energy to satisfy us, right? And then there's Sat. Actually, Sat is cognate in English with is. It means being. In fact, if you study, and I looked at the etymology extensively of the word to be, or is, or are, and it traces back to a phrase that indicates that which remains. That's the meaning of is, that which remains. That's helpful, right? Yeah. And it's also congruent with the idea of the Bhagavad Gita. That which remains, you can say that exists. The things that don't remain, they just move on. It doesn't really exist. For you, that's the inferior energy. Don't worry about it. I mean, do worry about it, but don't become abhinibheshita, absorbed in it. Become absorbed in Krishna. Here's, hopefully, I haven't read this recently, but maybe this has some points that would be helpful. This translation is from the Bhagavatam, and the verse number is 1087. Is that prayers personified? 85? 1085, 2, 4. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead who manifests as the Lord of both nature and the Creator of nature, Mahavishnu, Everything that comes into existence, however, and whenever it does so, is created within you, by you, from you, for you, and in relationship to you, in relation to you. And it's this purport that I found fascinating and perhaps related to these semantics we're into right now. To casual observers, the known world appears to be produced by many different agents. A good indication of this conception is language itself. Get out of here. Some things jumping in here. A good indication of this conception is language itself, which traditional Sanskrit grammarians explain as reflecting the visible diversity of nature. In the standard Sanskrit grammar taught by the sage Panini, the verb expressing action is taken to be the essential core of a sentence, and all the other words function in relation to it. All glories to the verb. Just think about it. I was thinking about it in relationship. Krishna says in the Bhagavad Gita, Nahi kashit shanamapi jato tisyatya karma krit karyate yavasha karma sarva prakriti jaragunai. And no one can refrain from doing something even for a moment. Life means activity, desire, and what else? Did somebody say? And so there's a way in which, abstracted in language, the concept of a verb, you need that. If you write without verbs, what are you going to have? You're a writer. What do you get when you write without verbs? Can you say a sentence without a verb? Can think about it. Write a poem without verbs and let's see what happens. And so there's this intimate connection with life, and the verb itself indicates that we can't live without action. Then it's the core of a sentence. Nouns, for example, are put into any of several cases to show their particular relationship to the verb in a sentence. These relationships of noun to verb are called karakas, namely the relations of subject, karta, who does, object, karma, what is done, instrument, karana, by which, recipient, sampradana, for or toward which, source, upadana, from or because of which, and location, adhikarana, in which. Apart from these karakas, nouns may also sometimes point to other nouns in a possessive sense, and there are also various kinds of adverbs of time, place, and manner. But although language thus seems to indicate the activity of many separate agents in the manifest creation, the deeper truth is that all grammatical forms refer first of all to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In this verse, Vasudeva makes this point by glorifying his two exalted sons in terms of the different grammatical forms. So it's not in the pairs personified Vedas. It's not there, somewhere else. That's why we're... And so everything's the Lord pervades everything, and he is consequential to our lives, and therefore Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says that we should use our senses, sarvapadi vinirmuktam, tatpratvayana nirmalam, rishikena rishikesha sevanam bhakti uchite, in service to the Lord. And that includes the internal senses and the external senses. And then our lives will be perfect. So thank you to the sages who said this, vadanti tattva-vidas, and gave us a clear idea. So now let's have some discussion, reflections, questions to expand these ideas.
Hare Krishna Maharaj,
Hare
thank
Krishna.
you. Thank you so much for this topic about Tat. As I was traveling here and I missed my flight, and so that just made my mind very disturbed. And I said, do I still want to go here? And I was finding ways. And I was calling the travel agent, I was calling the airline itself. And at the time, nothing was working out, but I was not disturbed as much as I thought I was going to be disturbed, because I got my morning program in. I did my chanting, I did my reading, I did everything. And then when I finally thought about it, I said, I want to go where the sages are. I want to be personally present in the Dham. So I really want to go. And with that desire, I tried again. I said, let me try just one more time. Let me see if I can get a flight. And I had to purchase a whole new ticket. But I said, it's okay. Krishna is giving all this stuff to me. So why not use it in his service? So I'm very, very grateful to be here, to hear the holy name, and to know that my only purpose in life is to please Krishna. And I know who he is by you constantly speaking about that. That is a person. Everything else is just minor things. No need to worry.
Bravo! Yeah, the trouble we take to come to the Dham is you get extra credit. In fact, it's mentioned how in visiting the Dham, when you're coming and going, that's still part of the pilgrimage. It's not that it's only when you're there, but it's getting ready, going out the door, missing your flight, getting another flight, thinking, should I, shouldn't I? All that is part of the purification. Let's speak of getting home. Yes, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for so nice class. I think I just want to say that the couple of things you mentioned, that one may think that they might have taken the bath in the same river again, like second time, but that may not be true, because that's not true, because the river would have changed. And then same thing like for the breathing, like if you inhale and exhale, and the next breath wouldn't be in the same body, it would be different. It kind of really struck me, like, that the things are changing so much and we don't actually realize, and how the things are changing so much. And then later in class, when you're talking about Om Tat Sat, and you simplified the definition in English, like one that remains, I think I felt like the whole puzzle was solved, that if everything is changing and something is remaining in the end, that is what really should matter, and that is what we should focus on. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you for the summarization of some of the points. Yes. Om Tat Sat. We reaffirm our intention, where we're pointing our attention, why we're doing something, what's the verb in it.
So I found that question very intriguing, because we can...
Which question? About writing a sentence without a verb?
The context.
Yeah.
Because we can write poetry without a verb. Blue sky, waterless ocean, it can. But I was thinking in context with what you're saying about this verse and spirituality, it's without the action. There is no growth, there is no movement. So there's no chance for the jiva to transform. So I find that very intriguing.
Yeah, I do too, and I think it's a nice study how words relate to personalism. And we're satisfied by the language of the Bhagavad Gita when it's as it is, because it points to the Supreme Person. And we're not satisfied when this same language is misinterpreted to miss the point. Thinking of other ways of writing and syntax, the passive voice, for instance, has always been interesting to me, in that I saw a New Yorker cartoon once in it. There was a person pleading his case in court, and he said, and then shots rang out. Meaning that, it just happened. But there's no doer. And then shots rang out. And then any time the passive voice is used, there's always a sense of wanting. Like, who did it? Who's the subject? Who said it? Who made it happen? And I can note it when somebody's speaking and they use the passive voice, that I'm thinking, yeah, but be more specific. In fact, the more specific we are I find when devotees give reflections, they talk about themselves. In many venues, when they are specific and they say, I did this and this is what happened and so forth, it becomes it becomes interesting. We want specificity and not an amorphous idea that it just happened. It doesn't satisfy. Okay, a couple more. 1, 2.
Hare Krishna, Guru Maharaj. Thank you for that wonderful class. In English, the first concept that comes in grammar is subject and verb. And a verb can make a sentence, go, leave, but we cannot even, so only verbs can make a one-word sentence. And then I was thinking that nothing is more important than action, and our devotional services are all action. Prabhupada says it's a good thing to say I love God and I worship Him and this and that, but there has to be loving devotional service, and every service is an action that we perform to please the Lord. So that is a very important aspect in our movement also, the service, the action. So I was just thinking about
Yeah, and just to give some nuance in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami describes two kinds of engagement and action. One is external and the other is internal. The internal meditation that one has is also considered active. And then the external use of one's senses, which I alluded to, was sarvapariva nirmuktam. And your point is well taken. It's a very important point that Prabhupada didn't just say devotion. He said devotional service. Ekadashi Vrat.
Hare Krishna, thank you. I was appreciating your saying it's not that the world has many problems, but the world itself is a problem. That was really nice. And it's a nice, concise reminder for me that when I'm feeling frustrated, it's because I'm thinking I'm supposed to be enjoying something, or I'm not supposed to have any problems, but the world itself is a problem. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a categorical distinction. Just repeating what I said before, if I categorically understand that the material world has a purpose as a place for purification, or in any context, I change the context and I say I'm doing this for my own purification, then the way I approach it and the way I perceive what's happening is very different also. In many ways, Prabhupada addresses the world categorically. For instance, one of my favorite phrases he uses in talking about the material world, he says it's a colossal hoax. That's a momentous phrase, isn't it? It's a colossal hoax. And there's so many goings on in the world everyone thinks are important, all the details in physics and politics and any other, the various ways that humans are engaged. But as Narada says to Vyas, idam hi pumsam tapasashutasya va suktasya suistasya to buddhidatayo avichutar tar kavibir nirupito ka uttama shloka gunarnavarnanam, means there are all these arts, sciences, schools of thought, and that all of them, when they're disconnected, or in the positive it says, when they are connected, they're meant to be connected to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And if they're not, then categorically they're bad. That's one of the points that he makes also about literature itself. He says that no matter what is written, even if it's greatly embellished, the greatest writers in the world, the devotees don't want to go there because they say, as he gives this metaphor, it's a place of pilgrimage for crows, all the literature of the world, unless it connects back to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And Prabhupada even commented about pseudo-spiritualists who wouldn't name the Supreme. They will say that they have some amorphous idea of the Supreme and they express their devotion, Prabhupada said, name them. For instance, when Prabhupada was speaking to a famous yogi in Los Angeles, who will go unnamed except his name was Yogi Bhajan, and he was a friend of our movement and used to come to the LA temple. And Prabhupada had a conversation because he had come and invited Prabhupada to a conference where, quote, he said, and he was inviting all kinds of these Mayavadis and different kind of yogis around the world that time. He said, we'll come together, we'll be together, and we will merge together. And then Prabhupada says, they will never. As in, they'll never merge because they won't have a common understanding. And this is one of the misconceptions, that the more amorphous it is, the easier it is to merge. And then Prabhupada's making a different point, the opposite point. And the more specific you are about who God is and that He has a name and there's a place to point your attention where you can worship, as Yogi Bhajan, in trying to capitulate and give some ground to Prabhupada, said, in the Granth Sahib there's mention of Govinda, or one of the writings of the saints of that Sikhism. And Prabhupada said, so take it. So why don't you take it? And he was reticent, was Yogi Bhajan. He was saying, oh no, but there's others, we have to merge. And Prabhupada's point was, unless you have that, unless you have a place to point your attention and you can name it, and you can then offer yourself to that person, then yene ravindaksha vimuktamaninas, I quoted yesterday, then you'll fall down because you won't get it. And even if they're so-called high-minded principles, Narada says in the same chapter I quoted from earlier, the 5th chapter, Nashobhate jñānam alam niranjanam, naishkarmyam apyachuta bhava varjitam nashobhate jñānam alam niranjanam. That he says, it's not nice enough to attract our attention. Nashobhate means, nah, meh, whatever it is. It could be, let's do non-fruitive action, naishkarmyam. Okay, nice, but meh. And then naishkarmyam niranjanam, you're working for, it's not karma, you're doing something else. That's not it, because it doesn't have a chuta bhava. You have to have specific love for a person who has qualities and so forth. And that's what's missing everywhere. In all the literature of the world, says Shukadeva Goswami, when he says that, what's the verse I'm thinking of in my mind? About the Bhagavatam. What? Tadvagvisargo janataga viplavo yasmin pratishlokam abadyabatyapi namanyanantasya shonkitanyat shrinvanti gayanti grananti sadhava. In fact, it says there, even if it's imperfectly composed, as compared to those literatures that are highly respected because of the perfection of, so-called perfection of the language, those are for crows. And then he says, but this other one, Namanyanantasya Shonkitanya, because it's all for Krishna and it's mentioning the names of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, it'll change you from the inside out, and you'll attain the perfection of life by hearing from this literature. What speak of being enamored of it, and that's where you could place your full attention. Okay, one last one? Yes.
Hare Krishna. You gave the example of Yamraj appearing as a 5-year-old boy, asking the wives of the dead king why, where the king was, why they were still attached to him. I thought that example was effective in distinguishing between the soul and the physical, the gross body. But could you elaborate more on how one can do the same with the subtle body? Because I feel a lot of times attachment is rooted more in thoughts, in emotions, things that are less physical, more subtle. So how could one intuitively distinguish between who I am, the self, the soul, versus my thoughts, my emotions, the subtle body?
Well, Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita then talks about how when one becomes purified, is able to see the difference between the body and the soul and the subtle body. For instance, in the 15th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, he gives this series of verses which you could say begins with shariram yadavapnoti yat shat yukramatishvara, grihit vaitani samyati vayurgandami vashayat, shotram chakshu sparshanam cha rasanam granam evacha atishtayam manaschayam vishayanupasevate, ukramantam stitam vapi bunjanan bhagunan vitam vimudha nanupashyanti pashyanti gyanachakshita, yatanto yoginaschayanam pashyantyatman yavastitam, yatanto pyakritatmano nainam pashyanti. So this word yatanto is very important because he's describing how there's this phenomena that everybody who's wise should know about. And he gives these examples that your subtle body becomes affected by its association, just as the air becomes affected by its association. You can definitely appreciate that here in India, in various places. Or New York City for that matter, anywhere there's people. So then he says, then you should know, a trained person, he's talking about the training of spiritual training, a trained person, then he said that there's consequences to that. The subtle body then is accommodated, the mood of somebody, the subtle body is accommodated by the material nature and is like the filling in, as Patanjali Muni says, whatever desires you're left with, the aggregate of your desires, they're like footprints on sand. And then when you put your footprint on wet sand and then you fill it in with plaster of Paris, you get an exact replica of your foot. So he said, take a look at your body. That's an exact replica of your desires in your last life. That's what you wanted. The material nature just filled it in. Such shotram chakshu sparshanam cha. Then he says, and when somebody, ukramantam stitam vapi, when somebody's trained in this science, he said it's a science, you should know the difference. Ukramantam means the soul just stepped out, like where'd he go? Yeah, he took off. But what did he take off with? With the subtle body. Yatanto yoginaschayanam. If somebody's trained in it, he knows how the subtle body has left the body as well. He can see that phenomena going on, and he knows how that subtle body gets accommodated and filled in for the next life. And that brings us to the end of the Śrīmad-Bhāgavatam class. Dear Srila Prabhupada, dear Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Shri Panchatattva, Sri Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya. And if you so desire, please empower us here in Jagannath Puri to imbibe the mood of separation that Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu felt here. And please let us become useful to Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as his servitors like Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya, Srila Ramananda Roy, Srila Swarup Damodar, et al. Had provided for the Lord. Thank you for considering our request. Everyone agrees with this prayer in whole or in part. Please unmute and say Hare Krishna. Vancha kalpa durvascha kripa sindhaveva chapatitanam bhavanibhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha nantakoti vaishnavihi jai. Sharira vijjajam jodendriya taheka jive pele vishaya shagare dharma jedivayati Laba moy sadurmati take jeta ta samsare Krishna Bodha doya moy Hari Bari Jiva joy Shaprasad Nadilo Bhai Shayanamrita Pao Radha Krishna Gunagam Premi Dako Shri Chaitanya Nihitai Premi Dako Shri Chaitanya. It's in your songbook. Nihitai, songbook. Mahaprasade Govinde Nama Brahmani Vaishnave Sapa Punya Bhatam Brajan Vishwaso Navajan Prasade Sarva Dukkanam Hanirasyo Pajayate Prasanate Taso Yashu Buddhipaya Vadistate Tvayopa Bhukta Nanda Vasalankar Charchita Utishta Bojino Dasa Tavamayam Jaimahi Chakaranam Bapi Na deshaniya mastatra na kalaniya mastata praptamanam dhritam shishter bhoktare mariya brave Bhagavat Shri Mahaprasadiki Gopremanande Nitai Gaura Haribo 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 Nitai Gaura Haribo. Is today another fasting day? No? Okay.
Okay, Hare Krishna, dear devotees, a few quick announcements. The program for today, we are going to go first to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's place.
Haribo!
And then we are going to go to Gambhira. So right after these announcements, we're going to have prasadam. And after prasadam, we'll all assemble. Chukus Ben and Prabhu, you want book distributors to pick up the books, book bags? What time?
So from 9 o'clock onwards, we'll have the book bags ready in the near the reception, so you can just collect them on your way out. Also, when we come back, if you could leave the book bags again where you picked up from in the by the reception. And also, I think there was a question yesterday about the Bhagavad Gitas. So all the Bhagavad Gitas are sponsored, so we can just hand them out, but we should ask for donation for the benefit of the receiver. So yeah, so we all the books we can just collect donations.
Just like
the cost is 250 rupees per gift, but they be sponsored, so we can hand them out.
Tell them it's Vamandev. All we ask is 3.
And also one of the other things is every day we're carrying about 300 Oriya books, 150 Hindi, 150 Bangla books to everywhere where we go. So if you ever run out of books, we have plenty like when we're there. So just fill them up. And I think myself and Vijay Goin Prabhu will be carrying extra books. So just reach out to us. Thank you.
A few more things on that. That those of you who are not new to the yatra know about khaja. So that's an Indian sweet, and so Manoranjan Prabhu arranges for that. That if you want to take khaja with you back home, then this time it's simple. It's only one size khaja box. Earlier there used to be 2. It's one size khaja box. It'll have about 25 pieces of the sweet, and it's 500 rupees per box if you want. Then we have to place the orders today itself. So Bhaktin Roshni, can you just stand up? So she has agreed, yeah, so that people can see you. Yeah, stand up, people can see you, right? Yeah, so she's the person to go to. She'll be sitting right at the reception, right, before the prasadam, after the prasadam as well. For those of you who are joining us for phase 2 of the yatra in Govardhan, at the place where we are staying, which is the Govardhan Retreat Center, it's a requirement for that those who are not Indian citizens, they have to fill a form with their passport details, etc. So I had circulated a form C for all of you yesterday, electronic, but I have got printouts available right outside. So you just stop by at the decks and you can pick them up from there. Also, there is a weight restriction on the airlines as we fly from here, Bhubaneswar to Delhi for the phase 2. So it's much better to buy the excess baggage before boarding the plane, because it's very expensive at the airport to buy there, right? So if you know how much, then please contact Manoranjan Prabhu directly. He will, make the arrangements for you, and you can pay him directly also for that one. That is all that I had for announcements today. Yeah, go ahead.
Hare Krishna. Just wanted to make one quick announcement that today we'll be going to Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya's house. The roads are quite narrow, more than yesterday's, so if devotees can just be aware of their surroundings and stick to one side of the street, because I've seen there's cars coming, there's tractors coming, there's a lot of things coming, so just be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah, Mataji, just one question regarding the filling out the forms. So I have like an Aadhaar card. Does that, I mean, I got a British nationality, but I got the Aadhaar card. Does it mean I still have to fill out the form? Or?
Yeah, so that form has to be filled by anybody who is not an Indian citizen. So we could have an Aadhaar card, we could have a what is that called? The other big card? OCI card. Yeah, OCI card. But that we have to fill it because we are not. We are as far as the hotels are concerned, they consider us as foreigners, even though you could be born in India. Yeah, but thanks for bringing it up. Class today in the evening program is from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. So, right? Yeah. Maharaj, anything you wanted to add? Okay. Yeah.
Regarding books, we noticed that a lot of people were asking Hindi and also English books. So if we can carry some, yeah.
We have English and Hindi books as well, yeah. Okay, any other thing? All right, okay.